All right, so welcome to another episode of Inside IALR. Today we have a fun one and sort of a different kind of episode. So I'm here with Iulian Bobe, who's the co-founder and advisor, and who he also served as the chief technology officer for many years for Circ. So Iulian, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
So I think, Circ, especially recently, has gotten a lot of, I would say, even international attention with, being a finalist for the Earthshot Prize and featured very prominently on CBS News. So I'm here to, talk to you sort of about the company's backstory, the history, how it's gotten to this point. And I think, the Institute here, we've played some role in different parts of that. But, to start, tell us a little bit about, the company's history. How was this company founded? How has it evolved since then?
Sure. We started as a technology company. I would say we all the time were a technology company, but we started with a different application. We developed initially technology to extract sugar and oils from tobacco, and we wanted to use those sugars and oils to produce biofuels. Actually, that's how we found Danville. We're very thankful to Tobacco Commission for supporting our initial technology efforts. We received initial funding from Tobacco Commission to come in the region. So at that time, we developed technology. We expressed oils and sugars in tobacco, and as you know very well, this region is very well known for tobacco, and we found the necessary knowledge, agricultural knowledge, to grow tobacco. So that's how we started. The way I started the company, actually, I started with a colleague of mine, Peter, that we met at Duke University while we were doing an MBA. And he was a good family friend with a very famous professor, Dr. Hilary Koprovsky, who invented the first oral polio vaccine. And Hilary was using tobacco as a carrier for those molecules because being an immunologist, he was interested to develop vaccines in tobacco. And of course, vaccines are proteins. So in addition to proteins, he also expressed oils and sugars in tobacco. Of course, the type of tobacco we grew was totally different. We increased the density of tobacco from 6,000 plants per acre to we doubled or tripled that density. So that's how we started initially. We learned a lot about biomass. We learned a lot how to extract those molecules from tobacco. And it turned out that all that technology, helped us with the application we do today of textile recycling, because tobacco is a biomass source, and of course, biomass has a lot of cellulose, which is the most abundant polymer on the planet. And when you recycle cotton from polyester, cotton has a lot of cellulose. So we quickly understood the similarities between tobacco and cotton in terms of cellulose. And it didn't take us much to understand that we can pivot into a new application.
This was around mid-2010, 2016, 2017 when that change was happening. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then I think you had said, talking beforehand, that Circ was sort of born out of that. I guess talk to me a little bit more about the problem that your company is trying to solve. I think the way that, that it was framed in the Earthshot Prize literature, and as well as in that CBS interview, is that separation of cotton and polyester and clothes. But tell us a little bit more about that and why that's significant.
Recycling is very important for the planet, whether we recycle clothing, or we recycle batteries, or we recycle metals. It's very important to recycle all these materials. For textiles, we produce millions of textiles, and a lot of those textiles actually end up in the landfill, whether they originate from factory clippings or unsold inventories or post-consumers. You have a tremendous stream of textile waste that ultimately ends up in the landfill. So the problem we are solving is basically recovering a lot of those clothings and therefore petroleum, because a lot of our clothing are made out of petroleum. Polyester, for example, is made out of petroleum. So another way of looking at it is we recycle above ground petroleum, right? We extract petroleum, we convert it in all this, clothing, and then we end up throwing those clothing away. So if we recapture the clothing, we can recycle those molecules.
And I don't want to get too in the weeds, but I know with that separation of the polyester and the cotton, I know that's sort of the defining. I guess the technology that your company developed, sort of that's what it does. And obviously, you were the chief technology officer. So at a high level, how does that work? How does that process work to separate those two things?
We are using a hydrothermal method, basically using water pressure to separate those polymers. Cotton, which is cellulose, is a polymer. Polyester is another polymer. So by manipulating the water characteristics under pressure, we are able to separate those two polymers. That technology actually, we found inspiration in Japan. While I did my PhD in Japan, we worked with a hydrothermal method to recycle other molecules, and I got inspiration in this technologies to apply it for a different application.
That's really cool. And so for Circ, I know a lot of I guess you guys are self-described as a circular fashion company. So what does that part of it mean? What is the, obviously you've described the technology and how it works in separating those two things, but what is circular fashion? What is that?
We have to go back and look at how our economy is today. Our economy today is described as linear economy. Linear economy is an economy where you mine for basically commodities like petroleum or minerals. You turn them into products, and at the end of life of those products, you throw them away in the landfill. The technologies of tomorrow have to be circular, meaning that at the end of life of all these products, you want to recycle them. So circularity is another word for recycling. So basically, it means we are trying to recapture all these molecules and reuse them. Of course, we will continue to mine for products, but it's also important to recapture a lot of those molecules that we already mined and are at the surface.
And I think I just want to, for context for our listeners, and this is pulled from the CBS interview that that your company did. There was a few statistics given in this interview that I think are really interesting. He said the fashion industry is responsible for about 10% of all global greenhouse gases, which is more than I think automotive and airplanes combined. The average piece of clothes in the U.S. is worn 7 times, and then less than 1% of textile waste is recycled back into textiles because of the inability to separate those two things, which is exactly what your company does. So I think that's just for context for our listeners who haven't, I wasn't very familiar with the fashion industry before, or textile recycling. But I think that, sort of sheds a light on the scale of I guess the problem and the solution that you all are providing.
Yeah, this is not a problem only in the United States, as a global problem. We have a couple of fast fashion companies that are producing textiles at a very rapid pace. We're talking full cycle in a couple of months. And because of that efficiency, a lot of those textiles are relatively cheap. So the consumers are somehow incentivized to buy a lot, but because the availability is plentiful, they are also disposing a lot. You have to remember that fashion is it's an expression of how people want to be perceived by their peers and family and society as a whole. So the textile companies and brands understand human psychology very well, and they're trying to change styles and colors and trends very often in order to encourage the consumers to buy a lot of textiles. Of course, the consumers respond to this, but the end result of this is that a lot of those textiles end up in the landfill because a consumer will use a piece of clothing just a couple of times, as you mentioned, and then it ends up in the landfill.
I know you've been more on the technology side of the company, but I think you can speak to this side as well. What is Circ's role in the fashion side? What is the company doing on the fashion side? How are you guys partnering with others in the industry? I know you've partnered with others to even develop your own lines. So tell us a little bit more about that side of it.
If you look at any industry, you can identify different players that have different roles. We call it a supply chain, right? And one part of the supply chain for cotton, it starts with the farmer that produces the cotton, and then it goes to a company that will spin it and turn it into a yarn, and then it goes to another company that turns it into a fabric, and then it goes to another company that will cut and sew. So Circ, being a technology company, is trying to play a couple of roles, but fundamentally, Circ is working with brands to solve this problem. And so we have a couple of roles, not only in providing a new yarn that is recycled, but also positioning ourselves as a functional brand, if you want to think like this.
So I know I mentioned at the beginning, that the Institute for Advanced Learning and Research, we've played a role in your company's growth at different points. I know we've provided analytical services, and you all, we're housed here. Circ was housed here on our campus for a little while. Tell us a little bit more about the role that the Institute has played in your company's growth.
The Institute here, of course, is an engine of economic development, and this is very important to a lot of startups and also new companies that are coming in the region. And for Titan and Circ, being a startup company, sometimes you cannot afford to buy very expensive analytical equipment. So the Institute has all these capabilities here for characterization of different molecules. So we worked with the Institute on characterization, and we borrowed a lot of these capabilities here. So for us, is definitely a player in the community that provided a lot of help. Instead of us going to outsource the services to an out-of-town company, we had it right here. And of course, this community has a long tradition, not only in tobacco, but also textiles. So we found a lot of talent and a lot of support, and a lot of people that we interacted with knew a lot about textile industry. I'm not from the industry. I started my career in in oncology. But I learned a lot very quickly. And a lot of the people that I met in Danville, they were mentors and provided a lot of knowledge that in the end accelerated my understanding of the industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was, as you were talking earlier, I was thinking about that, how we, I give tours of the Institute all the time, and the things that I talk about how when we were founded, it was sort of at the time when tobacco and textiles those industries were fading here regionally together. So that is really cool to see that your company transitioned from one of those to the other, and the cool technology developments happening there. And I do just think it's a cool, we, as you said, we're all about economic transformation, economic development. To see, on one end, we're working with major companies who are, employing hundreds of people and are well established. And then on the other hand, we're providing, chemistry testing services to, we can provide it to individual farmers, but even, to startup companies, and whether that be, analytical chemistry or lab space or polymer testing. It's a really cool to see, I guess, just the role that the different roles that we can play for those different companies, all towards that same goal.
Yeah, definitely. The knowledge is here. The analytical tools are here. So we found a lot of synergism in working with you guys.
So I think you all moved out of our lab space at some point in the last year, if I'm not mistaken. So tell us a little bit about where your company is now, and sort of what are the next steps? What's the growth trajectory for Circ?
So we started our initial operations out of Dan River Business Development Center. We refer it to DRBDC. Also, as you mentioned, we had a space here in the Institute, but now we consolidated operations in another building that used to be a tobacco company. So we renovated that building and we consolidated operations there. Where the next phase for our company is scale up, engineering. So I would say the technology is mature right now to go into the next phase of scale up. So a lot of efforts are happening right now in scaling up that technology.
No, that's really cool to see the growth that your company has had, from a startup to all the way to now, being featured internationally. And I think I think it was from the CBS interview. The quote that really stuck out to me was someone from your company said, we have all the clothes we need to make all the clothes we'll ever need. And I think that's a really cool thought, and the role that you all are trying to play in making sure that, we're not just throwing good material that we can repurpose away. If there is a way to repurpose it, let's do that.
Yeah, that's correct. If you look at polyester, theoretically, you can recycle it to infinity. This is on a theoretical basis. Of course, when you do manufacturing, you're going to have losses, but on a theoretical basis, you can dismantle the monomers of polyester and put it back together many, many times. So yes, we do have those. I tend to go back to the building blocks of those clothing. We see a piece of clothing, but in actuality, we don't really think that the building blocks are natural resources, right? Whether it's petroleum or cotton or metals. We don't think of the building blocks. But if you think of the building blocks, you can take those building blocks from clothing, and you can turn them back into clothing, right? That's what we do, is closed loop garment to garment recycling. But you also could take the building blocks from clothing and turn them into something else. In the end, the building blocks are commodities that can be recycled many, many times. And if you think about batteries from EVs, right? We use a lot of lithium, We use a lot of metals, and a lot of those molecules, they need to be recycled over and over again, because commodities on this planet are limited, and we're gonna be on planet Earth for a while, and we really have to recycle as much as we can.
No, absolutely. But again, I mean, I just think it's really cool, the work that Circ is doing, and I think it's a really cool, success story. I mean, that we like to share at the Institute, that, we can help those, those really large, already established companies, as well as those smaller startups, and help them at all the stages of their growth. But Iulian, that's all the questions that I have. I mean, is there anything else that you would want to add, or any other parting thoughts you would want to share?
Yes, another opportunity that I see in the region, and I got involved in is industrial hemp, because it's very synergistic to textiles. Industrial hemp is very different than CBD hemp. It really grows like bamboo. It is a very tall plant, and you grow it for fiber, not for CBD. So hemp is a misunderstood plant. It has a little bit of stigma like tobacco, but it has a tremendous it's a tremendous opportunity for the farmers in the region to grow this plant. Actually, if you look back at the history, hemp was grown by all the farmers. It was mandated by law during Jefferson time to grow hemp. A lot of our clothing were made out of hemp, but of course, with a prohibition, we kind of put industrial hemp and CBD hemp in the same bucket, and that was the end of it. However, in 2018, industrial hemp was legalized. So I believe that hemp can be another crop that can be in the basket of a farmer. So a couple of years ago, I got invited to sit on the board of a company called FiberX. So I'm a board member in this company that is trying to scale up industrial hemp for textiles. This is very synergistic to what we do at Circ. And I'm very excited to be part of this opportunity, because you really don't develop a crop. In our lifetime, probably hemp is going to be the only commodity crop that is going to be developed, which is exciting. In addition to corn and soy and cotton, hemp will play, I believe, is going to play a role in the basket of the cellulosic materials. Cellulosic is basically another term for referring to fibers like cotton or hemp or linen.
Here at the Institute, we provide testing services for farmers who are, producing that industrial hemp. So, obviously we support on even the smallest level those individual farmers who are, producing that and are definitely involved in that industry as well. So that's really cool to hear. How you're sort of bringing even those different components together and all towards that goal of sustainability and technology.
That's why I wanted to mention hemp, because actually the Institute was housing the first hemp summit in the United States. And a couple of years ago, all the farmers started growing CBD hemp without realizing that the market for CBD hemp is limited. I do believe that in order to scale up hemp, the best application is really textiles, or like fiber, seeds for food, not CBD. Coming from pharma, I believe CBD, has its own role, but as an amount, you really don't need a lot of acreage to grow the CBD that we need.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Iulian, I really appreciate you being here today. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Megabytes, IALR's on-site cafe, features everyday favorites, convenient ordering options, and an eager staff ready to welcome and serve you. Our enticing menus offer something for everyone, from a fresh, well-stocked salad bar, wraps, sandwiches, and our rotating hot buffet offered on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Megabytes is open Monday through Friday from 9:15 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. To view menus and for more information, visit IALR.org/megabytes.